Good afternoon, namaste, and welcome to a conversation on active imagination. I'm Dr. Rodney Penniman, and I'm joined today by Doctors David Sarnoff and Dr. Steinberg Henry. And so please stand by as we begin our discussion on active imagination. Gentlemen, do you want to introduce yourselves?
Yes, I'm
David,
David Sarnoff. I'm here in Charleston, South Carolina. I've been a psychologist for over 40 years, and I've also been a musician for longer than that, maybe 50 or 60 years. And lately, I've been enjoying combining a little music with a little psychology and helping people to go deeper within themselves to stimulate their imagination and their creativity.
All right. Thank you.
I'm Steinbeck Henry. I'm here in Stone Mountain, Georgia. I've developed an interest in active imagination after sight loss and an interest in studying the resources and the strengths of blind persons and use their active imagination as a means of getting to the inner parts of their being, the inner parts of their person. So it's such a pleasure to be sharing this discussion.
All righty. Well, thank you. So that's a good segue into our first question. And uh, what is active imagination? And
Well,
who?
active imagination, it's an activity, it's an exercise that a person could do. I mean, we can share in it. It is a look into the self, setting the imagination in motion. Sometimes it is called creative imagination. The person who led it off was Carl Gustav Jung, and he practiced it after much tension and break from Freud. He decided, let me look into myself to find if there are so many separations as such. And he came to a place where he discovered so much was at work in what he would call the unconscious. And it, there is so much to be discovered through fantasy, through visualization, through image making. But it is really a sort of meditation where you could sit and begin to look into yourself and imagine the images that are rising. So it's a fascinating exercise. It has implications for well-being. It has implications for healing. It could be stimulated by music. For instance, you will find along the way that Dr. David Sarnoff will play his flute. That's also one of the means that we
Mm,
could use to activate your mind and your
mhm.
image making and your imagination. Some people use dance, some people use exercise, people use works of art, people use writing as means of stimulating and just catalyzing that imagination, to open up the fantasy, to open up the emotional intelligence, the vastness that is in you. For me, as a person who was blind and is blind, I found if I couldn't see on the outside, how do I begin to look on the inside? And active imagination allowed me to go inward.
Excellent. Excellent. David, anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, I'd like to add that I've been using imagination as a psychologist. I've been practicing, as a counseling psychologist for, over 40 years doing psychotherapy. And lots of psychotherapeutic approaches help clients by using their what we might call imaginal resources. In other words, what can they dream up inside themselves? And
Mm,
of course, we have a lot of exercises that psychologists sometimes do. They might be called, guided meditations or guided imagery. And sometimes you might tell someone, well, relax, make believe you're on the beach or something like that, or make believe you're in a mountain. But what I've found over the years is something coming from the outside like that, in other words, a psychologist telling the patient what to imagine, isn't as effective as being more open-ended and more allowing the client to find their own beautiful place or their own happy place, their own peace. So I would say to a client, think about a place that you find very peaceful and a place that's so beautiful that you could be happy just being there. and that's very open. It might be the mountains, it might be the beach, it might be their own backyard, but it's whatever the client thinks of. And as far
Mm,
as imagination, some people might think they don't have much of an imagination. So I won't necessarily say even that they have to imagine, or they have to see something inside, but just to think about something. And they can think about it in their own way. Sometimes it's very vague. Some people can't really see in their imagination the way a sighted person would see things in the outer world, but they can still think about things. So, for example, if I say think about a tree, one person might be thinking about a pine tree and the other person's thinking about a maple tree. But if I, and they don't really even say that they can see it, but they're thinking about it in some way or other. But then if I ask them, well, what kind of tree are you thinking about? The person who's thinking about a pine tree is obviously in some sense seeing long thin needles, as opposed to the person who's seeing the maple tree thinking about the maple tree is seeing some kind of hand-like leaves on the maple tree. So the two trees look differently to a sighted person, and however the person is thinking about them, there's some difference. Now maybe some blind people have felt the tree with their hands, so they felt the pine needles, or they felt the leaves with their hands. So there's a certain sense of touch that comes in. Maybe some people, like Steinberg mentioned the music, some people are very keen hearers. They might hear the sound of the wind on the trees making a kind of a rustling sound, or they might hear something very faint in the distance. Some people they smell of delicious food coming from some restaurant that they're walking by. So I would encourage people to think about their different senses. What do they think? How do they think in terms of what would they smell? What would they see? What would they hear? What would they feel? As well as what would they see? And all of these are different dimensions of the imagination. And I think when Jung was talking about active imagination, I think he was talking the active part of it meant that, it's not somebody on the outside telling you what to see, but you're allowing the imagination to come to life and to move and to change, and it's active, and that it goes from here to there. So I tell them, you start out at some place, but then you might go to a different place. You might think about one place and then think about another place. You might start doing something there. You might walk around and explore the place. So it becomes active in that you let the imagination take over, and you don't force it, but it's like an adventure. You want to see. It's almost like watching. It's something inside you, but it's almost like it's outside of you. It's almost like it has a life of its own that your
sure,
conscious mind doesn't control. You just kind of let it happen.
sure, sure. So, what would you say are the benefits of active imagination? I think you kind of covered a little bit of it, David. But are there other things that Stein or David you'd like to add in terms of some of the benefits of active imagination?
Well, I could add more of, from the psychotherapy point of view, like for instance, phobias. A lot of people get afraid of something, and if they can just imagine what they would be like in the future when they're unafraid, when they're brave, when they're no longer afraid of something, like whether it's afraid of heights, afraid of public speaking, afraid of water, afraid of bugs, afraid of, all kind of fears that people have, flying an airplane, whatever people are afraid of, if they can imagine it, that they're unafraid, then usually they can actually practice that later in actual life. They can do those things they formerly were afraid of. Another example is maybe seeing some goal for themselves. Maybe they start dreaming in a positive sense. What is it that they want out of life, and it might help them to figure out a certain direction to take. So those are just two examples. There are many others like that where we have inner resources that can help us to create better lives for ourselves.
There are young children who are athletes, for instance, and when they're about to run, their coach will tell them, which animal do you really like? And the child would say, I like a lion. You say, okay, think about the strength of imagine you're a lion. Imagine you have the strength of a lion. The child would the mind would go to this. They would get the force, and people begin to feel the strength of those creatures. Some, they imagine themselves winning. They imagine themselves jumping. So imagine sometimes you have those types of things where people imagine themselves to be something strong when they need strength. Persons are known to do exercises in active imagination where they imagine a color of different things, a color blue, color of smoke, a color of smoke rising. And as they begin to look more closely at it, they have to be relaxed to really see it. And in the process of relaxing, their heart rate, everything levels out. They become really calmer. And over time, as this is practiced, you may have implications for high blood pressure and all those sorts of things because of heart rate changes and all those sorts. So there are significant physiological benefits to be derived from that kind of exercise.
Sure, sure. And really, Stein, it's your research into active imagination and its uses with individuals that are blind or visually impaired that really has gotten us here today. So can you talk a little bit about your discoveries through your research around active imagination? What as succinctly as you possibly can, because you know, uh, I know your dissertation was quite extensive and very detailed and thorough, and so just as succinctly as you possibly can, what would you say that you discovered through your research?
Well, simple things. Um, I worked with 8 blind persons, adults, and they are simple stories they would tell. For instance, one guy is walking home and he comes around the corner and he smells the Starbucks and he knows he has been able to check the number of steps from that particular smell to the entry into the train station, and he can count. So the sense of smell, one of the things I found is that their senses are heightened as a result. Somebody, another woman was traveling on a bus with her friend, and smelled, she smelled something, and she says, "Are we close to the McDonald's?" And the bus driver began to laugh and ask her, "How do you know you're blind?" She says she could smell. So blind people extend themselves outside of just seeing to 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 use their other senses of smell. That's one of the things that we found out. Some people were asking, when people lose their sense of sight, do they have an intensification of their other senses? Do the other senses become stronger? One guy said, you know something, I don't know if it really happens. For instance, if I have a coin and the coin falls, when I was sighted, I would just look straight at it and pick it up. But when I became blind, I would have to listen to where the coin rolls and when it falls, where it lands and stops for me to be able to determine where I should go to find it. So in that sense of hearing emerges. Those things happen, and so they use their sense of touch. One guy learns to deal with his clothing and his sense of touch is heightened. He can tell his executive material from his casual material, from his so those things. But you also have one of the other things I found, in addition to the extension of the senses, was an increase in memory. People who became visually impaired as adults develop tremendous memory capacity. They will tell you if they did not have memory, they would not be able to live in the world. Where they place things, where things were, where sights and sounds were, when they're entering malls, where is the door according to where they hear a waterfall, that is an inbuilt waterfall, or where they hear the traffic flow to determine whether they have crossed where they were walking. If they walk too much, then they begin to hear silence. Did they cross too far into the other part of the road? Those sorts of things. So they develop and memory, just the ability to remember the things that happened when they were visual. For instance, one student did got her to report to getting an A in her mathematics, even while she was blind. And she said it is because she was able to remember so much of the layout, A plus B, she could visualize.
Mm,
So visualization becomes an important instrument. Um, One of the more fascinating things is that as the as one begins to use the imagination, because in that word imagination is the word image, and researchers found that as when a person memorizes, it creates an image. And when it creates an image, that image making impacts the blood, the chemistry of the brain, and that chemistry oozes into the bloodstream,
mm,
which is a very interesting finding. So just the act of remembering transformed a person's well-being in a
mm,
sense.
mm,
Those are some of the things, many things have come about, but those are some of the things: memory, capacity for visualization, the use of other senses.
mm,
Then there was the business of talents. They discovered because they could not see ahead when they were blind, they had to develop abilities. Balance became another sense,
mm, mm.
for them. So those are some of the things. Now, somebody may say, what does that have to do with anything? Well, for people who are sighted, what they opened up for us is the tremendous resource that was the human mind and the human brain. So with a visual, sighted, a look society, meaning it was a very visual society. It is a very visual society that we live in. And suddenly somebody's saying, what are you hearing? What am I hearing? It doesn't matter. What are you seeing? That's what matters. So they dislodged people from their just purely seeing thing. In terms of computers, one of my participants said, look at the number of things that visual people are using, other than the GPS and other things that visual people are using, all emanating from blind people's experience. So the blindness experience, in fact, when it is resolved in any way, has significant implications for persons who are sighted and their use of the society in general. I don't know if this answers the question, but that's what comes to mind.
No, but no, you've thoroughly answered the question. So let's take a look at one of the things that we've discovered uh, about a active imagination is that it's an inner look, and so David and Stein, can you expand on that a little bit more in terms of what you mean by this inner look?
Well,
Different for each
okay.
person. I think it's different for each person. It's like
Mm,
for me, I became interested in meditation a long time ago, and I read stories about, gurus from India and people having visions and, spiritual people seeing spiritual figures and things like that. And so, but whenever I looked into my mind, I tried to look in my imagination. I'd close my eyes and meditate, and all I see was blackness. I was just dark. I was and that's where I got to the idea of. But after a lot of training, I started to have something more subtle. In other words, I started to think about something, and then when I thought about it, I could think about what it looked like, and somehow I could see in my mind's eye. I mean, I have a way of seeing now, and I can so I can see a flower. It's a camellia. It's red around the outside. It's
Mhm.
yellow on the inside. It's I mean, I can see in a certain way, but it's not seeing like I'm looking at you on the computer screen. It's a different kind of seeing. And for me, it still remains a little bit shadowy, a little bit vague, not as vibrant as when I actually look with my eyes.
mm,
But but yet it's still there, and I can still my imagination can be very active, and I can come up with all kinds of things. And sometimes they have a very emotional and personal meaning that can be
Mhm.
helpful to me. Whereas other people might see things, when they imagine something, it's almost like they're dreaming, like when they're dreaming and it seems like it's real. It seems like it's actually happening, and they're really
Mhm.
seeing things like they would when they're awake. So I think we,
mm,
we all have different, I think, levels a development of our senses,
See,
our different abilities. So it could be very individual, but however you experience it, there's something going to be something to it. And so I think a
Wonderful.
person could do it in their own way.
Sure, sure. And Stein, you were saying?
yes, I was saying that um, it it is not something that is very common in our Western culture to look inside.
Mhm.
In other societies, Eastern cultures particularly, where there are meditation traditions like in India and in places like China, where you have other, forms of exercises that promote that inward movement. Um, Buddhist traditions, some of the other Orthodox traditions coming out of Russia and other places, you 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 have people develop a way of meditating and focus. Closing of the eyes is a pretty normal thing. When we think, when you think of inside, what do you think? I mean, I have lungs, I have heart, liver, kidney, stomach, those are the macro organs, large things. There's also blood, which is something on the inside, it's under the skin. We don't, those things have been replaced by other kind of practices from churches and other institutions. But
Mhm.
what is it that we would suggest as a 21st century movement? It is you saying, what else do I find? Other than the biological, which is the microbiomes, the 86 billion neurons we have, 86 billion neurons in the brain, all these things in my head, and these things are inside an amygdala that deals with fear and emotional change or joy or pituitary gland, pineal gland. What are these things? And are they just there when something is wrong with them? So you go to the doctor because something is wrong, you have a sore throat, or is the throat also a place of for communication? I mean, we speak from there, and what are the eyes? Are the eyes only these two, or i- i- is it also a place, sorry, where we hear, where we see other things? So you have two, yes, I was slightly distracted. You have two eyes. Yes, those are physical eyes. And between them, another tradition out of India and other places, oh, these ancient peoples of Tibet, peoples of Africa, they came up and they said, there's another eye, it's between your eyes. Can you close your eyes? When you close your eyes, what do you see? Everybody who meditates know that they close their eyes to look inward. The
Mhm.
blind people who close their eyes will tell you different things. One
Mhm.
guy told me he saw a warm void. Well, that's a temperature thing. That's a heat thing, a warm void. Ooh, that's interesting. Another
Mhm.
woman said she saw colors, multiple colors, as she was having a sort of retinal detachment.
Mhm.
And then, as we moved along, we began to realize that there was an eye that was looking back at us. It is a very strange thing. And people began to say, but is there really an eye? In all the traditions, somebody mentioned of days of old, people said there was a mind's eye, but nobody go, how would my mind have an eye? You know? And then when we began to look inside, we began to realize that there was something more than just the macro organs. First to begin, we had breath, which, we just knew we were breathing. When I went to school in the Caribbean as a colonial society, they tell us, breathe in. And we do this, we didn't realize that we could breathe in from inside
Mhm.
because all the breath came from outside, but it was never coming from the inside. So there was a vast thing in us. When we were asked to look for God, we looked up always to the sky, but
Mhm.
never in us. And
Mhm.
how did we find that spiritual being, entity, name it what you want, in us? You have those traditions of Buddha who talks about that inward thing. You have Jesus Christ saying that the kingdom of heaven is within you. What is that within? And that is a beautiful place. And was able to say, well, if I cannot see outside because I'm physically blind, maybe I can see inside because I'm psychologically and spiritually and mindfully open.
Mm,
And so I went in on that inside space. Active imagination came along, and I had been meditating, as David said, for quite a while. So I was able to look, and lo and behold,
sure.
images began to appear. As
Mm,
David says, there is a world, there is the mind and spirit, they have bodies.
mm,
And those are some other things that, there's a lot to be said about it.
sure.
But it took, for instance, Lawrence Kohlberg took a little time before they could accept his seventh stage of development. So maybe it will take us a little time, but mind in education, spirit in education, just as how there's faith in healing, these are becoming significant things. So there's a lot to be found on the inside of a human being over
Sure.
just the mere organs that we learned about.
Sure, sure. And we oftentimes hear about this third eye, which is unseen, is said to be in the center of your forehead, and it's that third eye that allows you to see into those inner worlds. But that's a whole nother
Subject,
topic,
yes.
subject and topic for discussion. So the next question uh, leads us into a discussion around your your true self and the notion that active imagination introduces you to that true self and allows you to see your blindness or visual impairment not as a problem, but an opportunity to know more about you, your joys, and your strengths. Uh, so, can you expand on that a little bit more, Stein, and any thoughts you might have on that, David?
A few. A true self, there used to be the big S and the small s. When what we are talking about, for those of us who have a, a, a an idea of the psychological and how the things that are psychology driven, you would hear the name Sigmund Freud.
Mm,
And Carl Gustav Jung was his student who broke away from him finally. Freud would have spoken almost about a conscious, a subconscious, and an unconscious, but it seemed to have been a frightening place.
mm,
You
mm,
you didn't you could. It's almost like when you went there, you sort of got terrified by all sorts of images and
mm.
dreams and funny things like monsters and troublesome matters and the dreams
Yes.
that you had. That was frightening. And then Carl Gustav Jung came along and said he started to talk about a transcendent function where he began to see not a separation. And then I came across a guy called Tony Nader. He was in the transcendental meditation tradition. And he said, oh my God, let us close our eyes and we slip into that blissful place. Conscious, subconscious, and unconscious are one blissful place. One, and it is accessible to all. And it is not a terrifying place at all. In fact, you go deeper and deeper into deeper levels of consciousness. And it was beautiful to see the erasure of those boundaries between segments. And it became, oh my God, so it's possible. Yes, it is possible for all of us. We can all do it. And what that meant for me as a blind person is that I was no longer, I could delve into an inward place that was not frightening anymore. It was not a place of horror. It was a place where I saw color, I saw light, I heard sound, and in the process, my memory was enhanced.
Mm,
Then I could fantasize. And when you came out of that, because of the profound sense of relaxation that you experienced, in the Hindu tradition, for instance, among the Buddhists, there are chants. when I did transcendental meditation at the time when I did it, you would have certain things that you said like a mantra. And as you went tuning it, they would talk about it. You went into the mantra, you went to deeper and deeper levels of consciousness, but you crossed boundaries. It was a separation, like in colonial societies, they would talk about departments of culture, and they seem to have been divisions of education, divisions of culture, divisions of economics. It wasn't a division. You cross boundaries. For instance, Bruce Lipton, another scientist, is an epigeneticist. He said between 0 and 7, all that we desired as an adult is laid down between that time, between 0 and 7. That may be debatable, but what is beautiful is that that thing that was laid down in the early stages, and it makes sense, went right through our lives and our stages of development, right through to old age. So there was a free flow that was happening in there that caught my attention. I said, my God, I really cannot see it on the outside. But what if I delved into that place where there was uncertainty, where there was darkness, where there was image, where there was color, and suddenly I began to tap into the sectors of my brain, the hypothalamus, the tricuneus, the cerebral hemispheres became more active, the language sectors, the logic centers, the mathematics centers. Because each time I was relaxing more and more into myself. And that is not something that has a very abundant language, because spirit is energy. So the person came upon, and as you went deeper into yourself, you came upon deeper levels of awareness, because it's not about the liver and the lungs and the stomach and so anymore. It's about something else. That is fantasy, that is imagination. And imagination, and it's an energy. That is what is beautiful about it. As you relax yourself more and more into yourself, more and more. So you went from subconscious mind into subconscious mind, into the unconscious. And the unconscious became not a wild place, but a friendly place that energized you. Why? Last point, because the organs that constitute the whole brain and the whole body are as ancient as the first human, and they are still in us.
Interesting, yeah, because Freud, did spend a lot of time talking about the id, the ego, superego, and the battles that exist between those things, and yeah, very frightening, very frightening place. Anything to add to that, David?
Well, no, I think it's time for us to try it. I want to, it sounds great. It sounds like what he's talking about is what Assange Yogi is a contemporary of Freud and Jung.
I agree. Yeah, I got one more. If you'll indulge me a little longer, I've got one more question, and then yes, we can get into an actual activity and exercise, so that our listeners might be able to experience their own active imagination.
Beautiful.
So this next question, asks you to think about. How can we use or how can we use our imaginations for our physical and emotional healing? So how can we use our imaginations for physical and emotional healing? And David, do you have anything you might want to start us off with on that?
Well, I could tell a story about a personal experience that happened to me it happened gradually over the years. When, after being a psychologist, I was practicing, for 35 years. And of course, I heard a lot of stories of, abuse and trauma and death and rape. And I mean, so much misery and pain that I heard for all these years. And one time I was looking into my heart to see how I felt about myself and my life at the age of about, 65 or whatever. And I saw my heart as being hamburger meat. It was like all ground up from all the pain and misery I've experienced. But then when I looked a little more into it, I began to see you know, well, first I thought about that like as a pot. Like if someone poured love into my heart, it would just drain out through all the hamburger meat. It would drain out like when you if you put water into a potted plant, the water drains out onto the sidewalk underneath the plant or wherever it is, just drains out. But then all of a sudden, I saw some green shoots coming out of my heart, like vines coming out, and they went out to into the world, and I saw that those could like surround somebody else and touch them from my heart. So it's like I could still reach out and relate to people and express love through my heart, even though it was that way. And I looked again at the plants, and I realized that when you water the plant, even though it looks like most of the water is draining out into the sidewalk under the pot, really a lot of the water is still in that soil and it's damp, and the roots can take that water and grow and flourish. All that imagery kind of made me feel that there was still hope for me, that I could still love and care, and maybe I'm not the same as I was when I was a young person, but that I still can reach out, maybe even more so. Maybe my reach can be further and greener and new and reach a lot of people, even though uh, I've got all that baggage, so to speak.
Sure,
That's just one
sure. Wow.
simple example. I think
Mhm.
there could be lots of examples like that. How
So,
you can help with all
so
different circumstances.
well, I'll never look at hamburger meat the same. Stein, anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, I think those are that was a wonderful example David provided, just the possibilities. Our imagination, Albert Einstein said imagination is more powerful than knowledge, and we use it every day. Um, when we when we drive, when we determine our road we want to take, when we decide how to do something, when we're planning meetings, it's also a real, a real thing that we use in everyday life. People think it's something distant for artists and painters, and it's only these people. But we use it in planning, we use it in designing, we use it in making a breakfast. We do a lot of things with it. For blind people, it is an opportunity um to find ways to move around their society, to cook their foods, to prepare their clothing, and those kinds of things. The beautiful thing is, and that is what is of interest, the more person practices a technique of looking on the inside, because that is where the energy is.
Mm,
It's the more, so the better I mean, in transcendental meditation, which is not what we're talking about here, but it's an example, they found significant relationships between the art of meditation and the balancing of blood pressure, for instance. So this looking inside has a way of calming, calming, removing a lot of the anxiety and the depression that is rising so frequently throughout this world. And if after a person is through working, at the end of the day, they can relax, just lay down or sit down or something, and just close the eyes and imagine an ocean, you
mm,
know?
sure.
Like, for instance, just imagine, like when I close my eyes as a blind person, I could see a whole ocean. You see an ocean before you.
Okay.
And if you see an ocean and then you see a sphere like a
Okay.
sun, and the sun begins to approach you, and you begin to look at the sun. And as you look at the sun, you say, is that really a sun? And as you begin to focus on what you see, or what your mind sees,
Mhm.
you become calmer and calm because you want to really see. One of the things about seeing from the inside is that you have to get your physical eyes out of the way.
Mm, mm.
Because if you try to see as you see with your physical eyes, the image that is before you disappears.
Yeah, yeah.
So you have to allow yourself to be seen as much as you see. Let me
Sure.
repeat that. You have
Yeah.
to allow yourself to be seen as much as you repeat that. As you are seen, you have to allow yourself to see as much as you are seen. And
Sure.
as you stay a while and you're trying to make sense of the language, the images
Mhm, mhm,
that come to you, whether
mhm,
it be an ocean, whether it be a
mhm,
house, whether it be a heart with trees coming out of it. You're
mhm,
saying, what is this? And as you relax to know those things,
mhm,
you become calmer and calmer in yourself.
mhm.
And when you get up from that and you walk away, you get your shower, you get yourself going, you just find you feel a little more energized throughout the day, a little more alive. There's an excitement about the play of mind that you just had. And this is just one of the more beautiful things.
I want you, now's a good time for us to do an activity here. And some of the things you were saying, Stein, I almost,
Mhm. Okay.
almost
Yeah.
interrupted you to say, take us to that act,
Take us to that.
to
Yeah.
the
Okay.
exercise.
Yeah.
But David, if you want because I
David,
know
you want to give us
he's
a
most
little flute
anxious.
sound as a
Yeah,
segue?
he's most
Hey,
anxious to get us started. So go ahead.
sometimes I think of this as a way to get the conscious mind to concentrate, or as you pay attention to the music with your mind, and that helps to calm it down, to slow it down, so then your imagination can take over. And there's lots of times our mind's like a wild monkey. It's chasing all over. We're thinking we've got to do this. Like, for example, I've got a work meeting in about 10 minutes or 15 minutes, and I'm thinking about that while I'm talking to you two. But we want to be peaceful right now. And so just listen to the music and concentrate, and then Steinberg will guide you after that.
You close your eyes, just relax with us, and look ahead. With your eyes closed, just look ahead. And as you look ahead, you breathe, you feel yourself breathing, your body rising and falling. You just feel that breathing happening. You may see darkness. Something could arise in front of you. Don't try to capture it as such as just let it float with you. If you feel anything in your body, just bring your mind to it. If you have any thoughts, don't fight them, just let them flow. If you imagine you're in a house, you've entered a house. A door has just opened and you've entered a house. And it's the house of imagination. Everything you can possibly think of. As long as you think of something, it comes and goes. Don't try to hold anything. Don't try to solve anything. Don't try to grasp anything. If a thought comes, let it pass. Feel the stillness, and the light around you is pleasing. Everything around you is very pleasing. It's delightful. In a house where you're welcomed and everyone is blessed.
Welcome to Tune.
Our annual Boost membership just got even better. Now you can choose from Disney Plus with ads.
And everyone is pleased to be here. You are looking at just life around you. And ahead of you, there's an ocean. A vast sea begins to open up. There's a light like a silver lining. The key thing, whatever you see or imagine or think, do not try to capture it or arrest it. Just let it float by like a cloud. You will see things come into you. You will feel as if things are coming to you and going away from you. And that feeling, that calm that you have, we're going to let it run through your body. Calm, run through your body. It's a beautiful color, a green. Gosh. It's white. Participate in the calm. As you go through the images, they change. So are you changing? Feel the change in your belly. Imagine the organs of your body. Listen to your heart. Listen to its beat. Wow. The last thing. On the tip of your toe. Just imagine the blood that is running through your feet, through your legs, blood through your thighs, through your knees, through your thighs, through your hips. Right up through your stomach. All the organs that are there are being washed in that beautiful. Oh, those wonderful forearms and the hands with 27 bones in each. Relax them because they love the blood. Under your skin, it's within you. It's a look inside. Go up your clavicle, your chest. Stop at your throat a while. It is the connection between your body and your head. You never thought of it that way? It's a beautiful place. Come into that head of yours. Your mouth, your tongue. You eat, but you also speak. What are you hearing? Listen. See? Immediately it goes right down to your belly. Blood under your skin, and it's beautiful. And the sun likes it. Just look at that beautiful sun. The blue star too, if you look well. Just comes in to say hello. There's an active world on the inside. Hey, just relax. I'm out of it. We're coming out of it. It's just one of those simple exercises. The key is to look at the things you see inside.
Mhm.
Don't try to grasp and hold them or to understand them.
Mhm.
Just let them pass by you and you pass also.
Stein, that's a great ending right there. Unfortunately, our time has run out, and so we have to end here. But I want to thank our audience. I want to thank you all for a wonderful discussion. This is part one of our discussion, and we hope to have you join us next time in this discussion on active imagination. So thank you to Doctors David Cernoff and Doctors Steinberg Henry. Thank you very much.